Now, welcome back to the show. Jim Nolan, playwright, is here with us still. Jim, people have been asking, how do they donate to help fund the play?
Okay, it's the website is called fundit.ie. If you go into that, browse projects, and then you look for, there's several different categories, and you look for the word performance. If you scroll on that and follow your nose, it takes about 5 minutes, Damien, to do the whole thing. You need to register with them and then give them bank details, and you make a pledge. The great thing about the pledge is it's pledge now and pay later. You have about a month or so, and only if the appeal reaches its target. Failing that, and that's a fairly simple process, as I said, 5 minutes, you could just go onto Facebook and go the Red Iron Jim Nolan, and follow the lead. There'll be links to it there.
One man who has been to a lot of your plays, and there's been a lot of people that have been influences in your life. Your former English teacher in Mount Sion, what's his name?
Sean Crowe.
Sean Crowe.
Yeah.
Sean Crowe. There's Sean Crowe there now.
Oh, holy God.
Sean Crowe is coming into the studio there now. Hello, Sean.
How are you, Sean?
Good, how are you?
Lovely to see you. My goodness. Jeepers. Where did you get him? The only place I used to meet him since we left school was in a pub.
Yeah, but I was watching you guys drinking and trying to control you.
Where you liar.
Come into the microphone there a bit, Sean. Sean, this is a surprise for Jim. He didn't know this was happening.
No.
Tell us.
Great to see you, Sean.
And you, Jim.
Sean, what was Jim like as a young lad as he was?
Sure, troublesome. But,
Troublesome.
Congratulations first on your work, Jim.
Thank you.
He
Great
was-
to see you again.
He was terrific. He had a love of words that I discovered early enough, because we started a library together.
That's right.
All right, Jim.
Yeah, this man did a great thing in there. There was no library in the school when we were there. Not only did he resolve to set up the library, but the critical thing, he gave us the money and said, go downtown to the book centre and buy the books. And he said, there's enough books on the course that you'll have to read. He said, don't be thinking about the course, go and buy the books. We bought the books, we started up the library, and about a fortnight later I was barred from it.
Yeah. Well,
We're not going into the details on that one.
Well, I am. If you were in a court of law, you'd have the right to reply.
Go on.
The year that Jim got his leaving cert and left Mount Sion, I hit the bottle and I was a nervous wreck. He did that to me, but he's not telling that side of the story at all. So there must have been a reason for that.
He was a wonderful, wonderful teacher, not just to me, but to everybody who passed through him.
Thanks.
Sean Dunn would have been a great colleague, friend and student of Sean's. We owe him so much. And it's wonderful to see him again. I'm just surprised he's still alive.
It's a big surprise to see him here, isn't it?
It's great.
When I arrived in Mount Sion, I sleptwalked, into a talent of students who contributed to the art in Waterford. Jim was one of the first, and of course Sean Dunn was a personal friend as well, and it took off from there. And I'm delighted to see that it's still working up there. They have a choir at the moment, which
That's
is
right.
getting national.
Yeah.
Very
So
good,
you were one of the beginners,
Yes.
Jim.
He always reckoned he was a missioner down from Galway to the poor people of Waterford, and I think he was.
Put on your headphones there, gentlemen, again, because we've got another man on the line.
This is your life or something.
Kind of is, isn't it? It's developing.
Is this the last play? Do you know something I don't?
I've seen your doctor, yeah. We've got John Nolan on the
A
line.
lot of things she never told me about. How are you, Megan? Good to hear from you. You should be working.
You should be working, he says, yeah. Megan, has he been a good inspiration for you?
Yeah, of course, yeah. I was only saying to them the other day, my dad's kind of writing is the only kind I've never actually tried to do. I've never tried to write plays, but as a person and a writer, obviously, he's my big inspiration. So not in terms of directly what I produce, but definitely as a writer figure, he's my biggest inspiration for sure.
Isn't that lovely, Jim? Jim, are you proud of her?
Yeah, that goes without saying. I'm just a little bit overcome by. I wasn't expecting this, obviously. But thanks for the kind words, Megan. Megan was one of the first funders of the funded page, and she also retweeted, whatever that means. So yeah, I'm a big fan of hers as well. But like, I've no idea what's going on.
And Sean Crowe, stay on the line, Megan and John. The idea, Sean, the idea of families passing down and passing on, I suppose, expertise. You've seen it in your days over the years in school.
Yes, yeah. Do you mean particular families?
Well, I suppose in the idea that like we've got Jim now and Megan is now a writer as well, it doesn't necessarily transfer, but it's lovely to see these things happening.
Yeah, I
isn't
never had the pleasure of meeting Megan, but I suppose like father, like daughter, it's great to hear that she's interested.
And John, do you think do you think Jim will ever get back at the old football? There might be an over 60s league now at some stage you might get involved in. Walking football, is that what it's called?
I should say to you very briefly there, Damien, that, and this is by way of encouragement to anybody else who's thinking of ultimately taking up a career in the arts. Jim didn't always work in the arts, He did try the normal career paths, as the rest of us might describe it. It didn't work out too well for him, unfortunately. You might recall his time at the in Dublin, when unfortunately he missed the bus a bit once too often and was advised to eventually to move on. Came over to London, where I was living at the time with our great friend Eddie Murphy. Eddie was demented trying to get Jim a job over there. Even bought him a suit and kitted him out for that.
Which I never paid him back for.
Else, joined Aircom, Telecom Air, and great family tradition there. He made the brave, artistically rewarding decision, basically, to go full-time to the creative arts in the 1980s, and that was a very brave decision, and the rest of this.
I hope you can stay on the line just for around 3 minutes, Megan and John, and Sean, just stay there, because yesterday afternoon, unbeknownst to Jim, I went to a certain house on the German road, and I spoke to a certain lady. Her name is Alice Nolan, Jim's mother.
Sure, Damien, I was very conscious of, I think we call it a triumph feminate, feminate, if you like, as opposed to a triumvirate of support that Jim has around him with my mother Alice, his dear wife Trudy, and of course his daughter Megan, an exceptional right in town. So it's good that you were able to get everybody in there. And well-deserved tribute to Jim. We're all very proud to call him, in my case, my brother. And I think he's a true Déise hero.
And Megan, lovely to hear that from your granny.
Yeah, it was great. One of the things I love about coming home is seeing my dad and my granny together. They have a lovely relationship, and my dad, as a person, apart from being a writer, obviously he's a great man and he's a very caring and loyal person. So I loved coming home and seeing them together.
Thanks very much for joining us, folks, and we will talk to you again soon. I know Jim will be on to you after the show giving out, because he never told me. This certainly will, yeah. Thanks very much. Sean Crowe, a lot of people texting in to say, wonderful to hear Sean Crowe, a brilliant teacher and a gentleman, one of the best teachers Mount Sion ever had. Paul Hurley and others have been saying that.
Thank you.
It's great to see you. It's great to see you, and I've heard a lot about you. There's a lot of people speaking very highly of you.
I would just like to say before we go that the highest award that the school could give was given to Jim. This was called, in Gaeilge, Gradam Canuck and it was for excellence in cultural entertainment. And I'm delighted that the school eventually recognised his excellence.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you.
We're back with a lot more after this, and Jim, we are just going to present you before we go to the next bit. Just hang on there. I'm going to make a presentation of €300 from WLR towards the play, towards the GoFundMe. So we'll do that just after this.
Thank you.
Sean Crowe, thanks for coming into us this morning. You'll stay around and we'll have a cup of tea afterwards with Jim. You can have a chat with Jim.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean.
Good to see you, Jim.
Jim, you got a little bit of another shock there just during the ad break. 2 people walked in.
Probably owe them money. I was wondering, do you know something about me that I don't know? I'm going to ring Liam McCann after the show. Get a medical.
TV Honan has joined us. Good morning, TV.
Hi, listen, I was just driving along the ring road when I heard this going on, and it's so rare that we have a beatification in Waterford. I just drove over and said I'm going to get in on this act.
Caroline Senior, thanks for coming up from Dungarvan for us today.
Good to be here. Wouldn't have missed it.
Obviously, he's a very modest man, and it's we're not doing this for any particular reason, just the fact that it's great to celebrate excellence in any walk of life. Go on, what do you think of this man?
Oh, well, most of it's not repeatable on air. But the bits that I can say are that when I worked at Garter Lane, it was just such a pleasure to work with Jim and his amazing plays. And while he's a curmudgeon and he's difficult, and he'd ring me up and say, "Where are the posters?" But just the connection that he made through his work. So I was lucky enough to work on 3 plays with Jim. probably three newly created plays and one that we produced. So when we did the refurbishment of the theatre, we had the salvage shop, and people came out of the theatre in tears. Then we had commissioned Brighton, and people came out of the theatre in tears because they saw themselves on the stage. And then we did Dreamland.
Laughs as well, not Carol.
There were a few laughs as well. But then we had Dreamland, and people were furious. They were so angry about this play that was fiction, but it connected. And then Johnny, I Hardly Know Ya. And the great thing now is that I'm able to continue to work with Jim, if you like, at a remove through my work with Blackwater Distillery, and we're delighted to be funding and part sponsoring Red Iron. But what Jim does with his work is he makes connections. It's unbelievable. People feel like it's them on the stage, or it's their grandmother, or it's their sister, or their father, or their husband. They see themselves, and that's the mark of a really, really great artist.
Lovely words. TV, would you concur?
I would, and I kind of, just to broaden out the picture a bit, I think what's very important about the work Jim has done and other Waterford artists have done over the years is that through their work, Waterford speaks to a wider world. That kind of work expresses us. It expresses us in the same way the football teams express us, the same way the hurling teams express us.
The same way Spree expresses us.
It defines us as a people, as a race, as a tribe. And
our chair has just been wheeled in, so Jim is worried about who's going to come in now to say hello to him. And now we're bringing in Alice, Jim's mammy.
Oh my God.
Alice, sit down there first. Thanks very much for joining us.
The chair, I was expecting my dad to be with me. He's dead 20 years.
He texted in there a while ago. He said he couldn't make it, but he's here in spirit. That's what he said. Alice, pull the chair in towards the microphone there, and you can join in this little conversation.
Oh, yeah.
The chair is going back to me. There we go.
There you go. This is live radio.
This is live radio, yeah. This is the brilliance of live radio. You can't get out of it, and you're
There's one of the Reeds from John's Park up there. We'll take over.
There's David Reed. You can just pull the microphone over towards Alice a little bit. You don't have to pull her in a bit. Alice, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm fine, Damien. Thank you.
Thank you for coming into us. I spoke to you yesterday, and we had to keep a big secret so we wouldn't have Jim in on this.
That's right. I was speaking to him earlier, and I didn't say anything to him.
Jim, have you anything to say to her now for not saying anything to you?
Sure, that for once in my life, I am speechless.
Makes a change.
Makes a change.
Yeah.
TV, he's a modest man, and again, you can say that in front of people when they're here, but one of the reasons that there's loads of texts coming in about Jim Nolan and the great praise he has, and it's a very embarrassing thing for a modest person to accept praise to the face, isn't it?
Yeah, he is, but he's also a very courageous person, because it takes guts to do what he's doing. It takes guts to go into that room on your own with ideas in your head and see if you can find some way of channeling those ideas onto the page. And even when you have them on the page, the great thing about theatre is you can't do it yourself. It then is a collaborative thing. But people want to work with Jim too, you know.
Despite their... despite everything.
Despite everything.
You know, cross-generational, you know, the early crop of the Red Kettle people are out in the world doing what they do now. Brian O'Doherty, National Theatre in England, all that sort of stuff. And then a younger generation that Jim has worked with, not only on the Red Kettle material over the years, but with students in the college, with young Waterford playwrights, encouraging them, giving them a pat on the back, saying keep going at times that they mightn't want to kind of do that, you know.
And just on that line, and you don't have to put on your headphones here now, just before we came on air, I spoke with Pat Moylan. Pat is the ex-chair of the Arts Council and director of Andrews Lane Theatre in Dublin. And I asked her about, let's put Jim into some sort of a national perspective.
Pat, but the core of our list are the plays by Tom Kilroy, Marina Carr, all of Brian Friel's plays, and Jim Nolan. And I think it's apt that he's in this company. It's hard for me to believe that it's 27 years since we published Moonshine. We've published 6 plays since then. And it's work I admire greatly. I'm happy to salute him on this week's edition of This Is Your Life. And look forward to working with him on new work.
Jim, have you anything to say to Peter now for this?
Is Peter live?
Peter is live.
Well, I'm not, obviously.
He's wondering, is John Thompson going to come round the corner, Peter?
John Thompson is the local undertaker, Peter. Lovely to hear from you, first of all, and maybe we'll talk off air another time. But thank you, and thanks to everybody for this. I don't know what to say about it.
Peter, thank you so much.
Lovely to hear from you, Peter.
For your lovely words, and it's
Thanks,
a pleasure for you to take part in this the special production of Déise Today. Jim had no idea this was happening, so thank you so much. And listen, long and happy further work with him. I hope it goes well with him. Have you anything to say to Jim to say goodbye?
We need to talk. I hear there's a new play.
I was keeping it as a secret. You've enough on your mind.
Read a secret on air.
So we're only having a chat here. Nobody's listening. We're only having a chat. It's absolutely fabulous. Peter Fallon,
Talk
it's
to you
lovely.
soon, Peter. Lovely to hear from you.
From the Gallery Press.
Thanks,
Thank you
Peter.
very much, Peter. Michelle Glendon has been on to say, I want to wish Jim the very best of luck. Personally, I had the best experience working with him in The Gods Are Angry a few years back. He's a tough man to please, but a fabulous experience. Alice, you can take off the headphones there now if you want.
Damien, I'd just like to pick up on something that
Caroline, please
Kat
do.
Moylan said about Jim's ability to direct, because it's an amazing skill. There are many great playwrights, and Peter has just told us the names of some of the few great Irish playwrights that we all recognise. But I don't know many of them who also direct. And Jim has this amazing skill to take anyone that walks onto the stage, well now virtually anyone, there is one exception, anyone who walks onto the stage in whatever theatre and makes something from them. And so when I worked at Garter Lane, I had the great pleasure of producing a couple of community plays with Jim, one of which was On the Razzle. It had a cast of about 67. That's not much of an exaggeration, huge number. So I said to Jim, this is my chance. There's a pantomime horse in this production and I want to be part of it. And Jim was so worried because he knew how what a poor actor I am. He rushed off to Spree and he commissioned a pantomime horse that, as you know, normally has a front and a back. So I thought, well, at least I can be the front or the back of the pantomime horse. So he rushed to TV. He said, quick, whatever you do, make a pantomime horse that can be operated by one person. So my great chance to be the rear or front end of the pantomime horse was lost. So
Please remember, that's a long time ago now.
There you
Every
go.
time I meet her, she reminds me.
I know, I never had the chance to be a pantomime
Caroline
horse.
has many talents.
Picking up quickly on
Before you come in
yeah.
TV, I'm going to take just a very, very quick ad break and come back to you in 2 seconds, okay? And we're doing a special, hour-long special on a certain man by the name of Jim Nolan. Shiner has texted in. Fair play to you, Jim. One of the best men ever in Waterford. Noel Lavery has texted in. Good friend and schoolmate. Handy left foot, says Noel. Other people texting in as well. TV, you were going to say just before the little break there.
Yeah, Michelle Glendon called in and talked about working with Jim on the show and about how kind of he's demanding and great to work with. I recall one time we were rehearsing a play, I think, called Talbot's Box, and one of the actors had run a line, and Jim said, hold up there, run that line again, there's something wrong with it. And so I ran the line several times, and then Jim eventually said, no, it's that word in the middle, that's what's wrong. And say that word for me over and over. We were trying to work on a Dublin accent in that production. And no, say the word again, It's the E. It's the way you're using the E in the word. Say the E now, say the E. Okay, you have it. Put the E back into the word. Put the word back into the sentence and whatever. And it was just, for me at the time, these were relatively early days. It was a fascinating insight into the process of how much the detail, the building, the tiny little details
Belt buckle, whatever it is. Yeah.
that led to the authenticity of the experience. Because Jim used to drive people like myself and Caroline crackers, because in his search for authenticity, like if he was going to use books in a shelf, in a play, they would have to be real books. And I recall one time, I said, Jim, it doesn't matter, they'll be looking at them, it'll be grand, no, it has to be, anyway. But, and then at the end of one night, people got up out of their seats, and as they were leaving tears, some actually walked onto the set and went over and started kind of actually touching the books, and Jim was there and I was there and said, I told you. Because if they don't believe those books, they're not going to believe the rest.
Rest of it.
Yeah.
A lovely message from Marina McGrath and Dunphy's Book Club, sending their very best wishes. We can't wait to see it. That's nice there. And you talk about the work and the research that Jim would do. Going to play a tiny little clip here. Jim did a marvellous series with Liz Reddy called The Glass. He wasn't. He's not bad at the old broadcasting himself. It's a nice voice there.
It's,
isn't
you
it?
it's
feeling worried,
extraordinary.
Damien?
Yeah,
It's extraordinary. That same thing occurred to me. We've been talking about the writing, we've been talking about the director, and love of sport, love of Waterford, and all those things. But I'd forgotten huge skill, huge ability he has. First time we met, I had made a video documentary, and he had someone to voice over it. And I couldn't pay him, and he said, "I'm going to do a play. Will you do sound in it?" But it was his voice. As soon as he started speaking, I knew he was
knew the voice.
one
Yeah.
to put on it, you know.
Danny Kidney has texted it. A gentleman, Jim, like your father. Well done.
Indeed.
Porrick Reef say, couldn't say it on air, at least I spoiled the surprise. I had the pleasure of being an actor with Jim on the Razzle. Such a joy to watch him get the very best performance out of all actors, despite themselves. An honour to have the experience. Mrs. Nolan, thanks for coming in this morning. You're very proud of all the family, aren't you?
I am, Damien, yes.
And this idea of Jim being a playwright, how special is it for you when you go to his plays and you sit at the front row and you see stories come to life?
Yeah, it's very special, yeah. I'm very proud of him, you know. See him doing well in it. He tries long enough, he's trying long enough.
And a lot of the family members come to visit you, and Jim comes nearly every
day, nearly, or on the phone, if not. He's very good, yeah.
For the chats.
Yeah.
And he keeps abreast of everything that's happening in John's Park and around.
Yeah, I always liked John's Park.
Do you think he'll stick it out there in the country?
He will, he's out there a while now. He didn't settle at the beginning, but he's settled now.
You mentioned Jim's dad there, just a quick story. John was hugely encouraging of us starting off. I mean, and this was this was a world that he knew nothing about. This was alien territory for him. But we're talking 1985. We're talking a time when you couldn't get a telephone in Ireland. If a big industry was coming to Waterford, they would have to get a government minister to intervene to get a telephone. And we were setting up the Red Kettle office, and I went down the street one day to O'Connell Street, and there were 6 post office vans tearing up the street and laying a new cable into the street so Red Kettle could have a telephone. And that was John Nolan. That was his way of encouraging his son and his son's friends to kind of press on with this strange thing they were doing.
Caroline, I want to thank you for coming in this morning. Sorry we haven't had much. It's amazing how the time goes, isn't it?
Look, it's
on
just,
air, off air, and
it's great to be here. It's great to have a chance to support this new play.
Yes,
and
that's the
what we should
important
say to people listening is, go to fundit.ie
and fund it.
Fund this play. It's from €10 up. You know.
Yeah, Jim, there's €300 towards the play. Very best of luck with it.
Pub now.
Straight. TV, thanks for coming in. Alice, Mrs. Nolan, thanks so much for coming in. It's a pleasure to see you. Jim, Jennifer put a lot of work in this, and David did as well. I want to thank them for putting all the work and getting all the different tips together. And Mary Roach, we approached Mary a fortnight ago with this idea, and we've got Sean in. So we're all going to go upstairs now, have a cup of tea and a little bun, and have a little chat.
Thank you very much to everybody who put this together. We'd be here all day if anyway, all I can say is thank you. And can we come back to you in October for more publicity? Thanks to everybody.
Go to the play, go to the play, go to Jim's next play.
100%. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for all the lovely texts and comments. We will talk to you again on Monday morning. Have a great weekend. If anybody wants to drop in and have a cup of tea with us now, upstairs in the canteen, they're more than welcome. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Damien.
Continued success.
Thank you very much.